Azul is a masterclass in design, and I'm not just talking about the appearance, although that is great. I'm talking about the way it can take simple game mechanics and combine them in such a way that there is a great deal of strategic depth. Today we are going to review Azul by Michael Kiesling. It is an abstract strategy board game for 2 to 4 players, and we're going to look at how it plays, the components, the good, the bad, and ask the all-important question: is Azul a good game for you? Azul begins with each player taking a player board and several factories being set up in the middle of the table. The number of factories is dependent on the player count, and 4 tiles are placed on each factory, drawn randomly from a fabric bag. The objective is to score points by tiling the wall on your player board, and this is done across 2 different phases. In the factory phase, players take turns removing tiles from a factory. They can pick a factory and must take all tiles of a single type from that factory, and then the remaining tiles are moved to the middle of the table. The player with the first player marker will go first, and they put this marker in the middle when they take their first set of tiles. The next player repeats the process, taking tiles from a factory, but they also have a second option. They can take tiles of the same kind from the center of the table as well. And in this regard, the center of the table essentially becomes like an additional factory. The first player that takes from the middle also has to take this first player marker. This means that they're going to go first next time the factory phase comes around, but this first player tile is placed on the floor of their board, which means they will lose a point in the scoring phase. When players take tiles, where they place them is very important. You can only take tiles of one type at a time, and you have to select what row on the left of your board to place them on. You cannot place tiles in a row that already has tiles of a different type, and if you take a number of tiles that you can't place in any row at all, then they fall to the floor, and that's going to cost you points later. Once all tiles have been removed from the factories and the center of the table, then the scoring phase begins. This can be done by all players simultaneously. If you have a row on the left of your board that is completely filled with tiles, then you can shift the rightmost tile onto your wall, into its match-in place. If you don't have a full row, just leave the tiles there and you'll have a chance to fill it up in the next factory phase. When you place a tile, you score points, and you get a point for every tile in the line and row that it's placed in. So if you place a tile that's not connected to anything, you'll get 1 point. And if you place it next to 2 other tiles in a row, that's 3 points. If you place it here where there's a row of 3 and now a column of 2, then that's going to be 5 points. You track points with a marker at the top of your player board. You then lose points according to the number of tiles on your floor, and clear off the tiles from the rest of your board if the rightmost space is empty. So basically you just remove all of the other tiles from rows that you transferred a tile across to your wall, but keep the ones that weren't used up in this scoring phase. The factories are then refilled with tiles, and the second round begins with the player with the first player token taking the first pick. The only difference this time is that when you place your tiles on the left side of your board, you can't put them in a row that already has that type of tile that's been transferred into your wall. The game will conclude at the end of the scoring phase, in which any player completes a full horizontal row on their wall, and the only thing then left to do is add some final scoring modifiers. You get 2 points for each horizontal row completed, 7 points for each vertical column completed, and 10 points for each set of 5 identical tiles on your board. And that's pretty much all the rules. These are actually far more complicated to write out and say than they are when you actually play the game. Azul is a game that's picked up very quickly. You can set up the factories, take turns grabbing tiles, and then use your completed rows to add tiles to your wall and score points. It's simple, it's clear, and it's satisfying because you are completing something, finishing a row, all the time. Let's take a look at the components. Azul comes in a reasonably small but very sturdy box. It's almost travel-sized in many ways. This is a game that you can take places, which is great. It is of course very pretty. Nice coloured tiles, the box itself, the player boards, the factories, and even the tile bag are all very well placed within the theme. The game has an identity, and it owns that identity. being based in the history of interior design in southern Spain and Portugal. But the components not only look great, they are effective and they do their jobs well. The player board provides all of the information that you need to play, down to a reminder of endgame score additions. You can clearly see how everyone else is going too, because all of the necessary information is displayed in a big way. You can see it across the table. You can see what they want, what their score is, just by glancing across at their player board. There are no little cards to read, and in fact the entire game, aside from the rulebook, is text-free. And this is an extremely underrated accessibility feature. The fact that you can play this game with groups of people from diverse language backgrounds without any issues is really great. The rulebook is laden with visual examples which clearly show how the game works, and is both compact and effective. One last thing that I really like about the tiles is the nice chunky feel. This is a game with highly tactile components. From the texture of the bag to the tasteful thickness of the cardboard, I struggle to find any reasonable criticism regarding the components of Azul. So there's a lot of great things to say about Azul. It's accessible, it's easy to learn, it's reasonably straightforward, it's engaging. And you might think, well, often those are associated with board games that don't have a huge amount of strategic depth. But I can say that this is not the case for Azul. It does have a significant level of strategic depth, and it comes down to the fact that there's so many meaningful decisions that you can make that are informed by what you see both in the middle of the table on the factories and also on other people's player boards. Let's say you're off to a good start. Do you want to finish off a row so that the game ends early before other players can catch up? Maybe you're going to go for some of the big endgame scoring bonuses. You're going to get a column all the way down your sheet, or all of one color of tile, all 5 of them, so that you get that massive +10. Both are valid strategies, but they can make you inflexible when going for them. Maybe you want to try and group the tiles that you place close together so that they synergize well and score lots of little points very, very quickly. Or maybe you just want to get as many tiles down as you possibly can with complete disregard to where they're actually going and hope that quantity over the quality of your placements wins out. Maybe you're looking at what your opponents are doing and you want to stop them from getting a particular set of tiles that will help them accelerate their point scoring process. Or maybe you want to take tiles that they don't want so that they're left with and forced to take a bunch of tiles they can't place anymore, and they all fall on the floor and cost them 8 points. Azul is certainly a game that will keep you on your toes, and that's because your strategy, your optimal choices, are always going to be changing depending on what's on the factories and what your opponents are up to, and it's that information that affects what you choose to do. And this is also, in my opinion, one of the best ways to include luck or randomization in a board game. All of the players have access to the same tiles, but those tiles are randomized. And that means you have to adapt your strategy between games and between play sessions to ensure that you're doing the best thing that you can to both score points and play against your opponents. There is a decent amount of player interactivity in this game, even though it mightn't look like it at first glance. And this is because all of the information here is public. You can see everything that your opponents are doing and everything that they have access to. There is no hidden information at all. Nothing is kept secret. The game state is open. And this means your decisions become highly tactical based on that information. Now, another usual gripe I have with this kind of game is scoring. I'm not a fan of point salad, where you add up everything at the end and see who wins. And this game overcomes that by essentially tracking your score in real time, aside from the end of game bonuses, which can be significant, but you can also see easily if someone's about to reach one of those. The score is made obvious on the player sheet at all times, and you can glance over to other players, have a look at what their score is and see, okay, who's a threat? Who might I need to make stumble here? How am I going in relation to everyone else? And that makes the game feel a lot more climactic when you get to that final round and you know exactly where you stand and what you're going to need to do to pull ahead. So you can play Azul like a normal family board game. You can also play it with 1000 IQ strategies and counter strategies. Both work, and what's fascinating is that both can work at the same time at the same table. And I don't think there's many games that quite achieve this level of elegance where you have a simple rule set overlaid across an enormous amount of complexity. But wait, it's a review, which means I do need to say some negative things about Azul. Don't worry, there's not too many of them. My first gripe is that I wish there were more tiles. At several points throughout the game, you might have to refill the bag from the tiles that end up going into the lid of the box and transfer them back across to the bag. And it feels like it really breaks up the flow of the game. It's probably my least favorite part of actually playing the game, where you're trying to fill the factories and then you go, oh, we're out of tiles, looks like we better fill the bag, and then everyone waits for a minute or two while that happens. It just feels unnecessary. If there were a few more, I don't think you'd have to do this in 2-player games, and you'd have to do it once at the most in 3 or 4-player games, and that would be nice. The other issue I have is that Azul does seem to work best at 2 players, and that's because at higher player counts, well, there's a lot more housekeeping. There's a lot more factories to fill with tiles, which can get a bit fiddly. There's a lot more times that you'll have to transfer used tiles back into the bag when the bag runs out. And in addition to that, it doesn't pay off as much to try and do that nice player interplay where if someone's doing something that I see they want to do, I can try and block them or pick what they need or leave them with a bunch of rubbish tiles, because that will only hurt one opponent, not the other 2, and then if I'm sacrificing my optimal pick to hurt that one person, then the other 2 can get ahead, and it means that you're less likely to go for that kind of aggressive player interaction, which I do think is really fun. Now, I could just easily say that Azul works best at 2 players, and that's a really good thing, because it still works really well at 3 and 4 players, but I had to find another negative to slot in here, so I'm just going to leave that there. So is Azul for you? Well, I think the short answer is yes. Azul is a great game to have in any collection. It looks great on the shelf in its box. You can whip it out and play easily with pretty much any group of gamers. But in all seriousness, there are going to be a small number of people out there who know that Azul isn't for them. And if you've got this far in the video, you probably already know that. You might love card-heavy games with a lot of explosive randomness or chance. You might love story-driven narrative games. You and your game group might be looking for something really super deep and immersive with lots and lots of bits and parts and tokens and cards. And you're not going to get that in Azul, and you've already figured that out. But if you are interested in abstract strategy games, then yeah, Azul is for you, because I would say that it is pretty close to the top of that genre. So thank you very much for watching. Please let me know what you think in the comments below. And I'm going to try and get closer to a weekly content schedule, so please subscribe if you'd like to see more. Thank you very much. I'm Merrick from Turning the Table.